And just when the smoke had barely begun to clear from Chantel's brutal mic-dropping testimony, just when Jackie Christie's once carefully scripted, Bible verse-laced public image lay in scattered ashes across the courtroom floor, a silence settled in that wasn't peace, but prelude, because the real avalanche wasn't emotional or even domestic. It was federal, and it came with a subpoena, a sting operation, and 3 armed agents walking into the courtroom while Jackie sat with her head bowed, unaware that her past wasn't just catching up to her, it was slamming her into a wall of criminal exposure she couldn't pray her way out of, because as the judge called the courtroom to order, a U.S. District Marshal handed Jackie's legal team a 47-page indictment marked Confidential, United States vs. Jacqueline Christie, detailing charges ranging from wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud, misuse of charitable funds, obstruction of justice, perjury, falsified LLC registration, and witness tampering, all stacked like bricks in a fortress built out of lies and self-help seminars. And just like that, Jackie Christie wasn't just a disgraced reality star, she was the center of an active federal investigation that had been quietly building behind the scenes for months, triggered not by Chris Webber's testimony, but by a series of flagged tax documents submitted in 2021 for her Christie Foundation for Community Unity, which, according to IRS records, raised $1.22 million that year, but could only account for $18,000 in charitable activity, with the rest funneled through a spiderweb of LLCs tied to Airbnbs, ghost offices, and post office boxes in Beverly Hills, Sacramento, and even Puerto Rico. And when Jackie's assistant, the same one who once hand-delivered an envelope to Chris Webber under her instruction, was called in for questioning, he flipped immediately, claiming Jackie paid him cash to backdate donation records, shred signed checks, and plant burner phones for communicating with C, whom investigators quickly identified as Chris Webber. And now, under direct threat of felony accessory charges, this same assistant turned over a flash drive with emails, internal invoices, and even a wire transfer memo labeled Private W Project, No Doug Access, for $25,000 that went directly to a consulting firm, now confirmed to be operated by Chris's cousin, whose name appears repeatedly in an offshore trust tied to a bank in the Cayman Islands. And if you think Doug Christie was somehow clean in all this, think again, because one of the most damning revelations in Part 3 wasn't about Jackie's infidelity or financial fraud. It was about Doug's signature on at least 3 joint filings that he now claims he never read, including one for a commercial property registered under the fake nonprofit Hearts United Sacramento, which reportedly never hosted a single event but collected nearly $130,000 in state grant funding in 2020 alone. And now that both state and federal prosecutors are involved, Doug's ignorance is no longer enough to shield him from liability, which means his entire legal defense team is scrambling, not to clear his name, but to prove coercion, manipulation, and emotional domination by Jackie, painting him not as a husband, but a long-term victim of spiritual entrapment, claiming she gaslighted him into believing they were building a ministry when she was really laundering money to fuel secret rendezvous, pay for high-end hotel suites under aliases like JC, Harris, and Vanessa Monet, and fund Chantel's private schooling on what may now be proven as funds diverted from government grants intended for underprivileged youth. And if you're wondering whether Chris Webber had any idea the rabbit hole ran this deep, let's be clear, he did. And that's why, after dropping his final folder of texts in Part 2, he immediately lawyered up, hired 2 federal defense consultants, and cut a deal to testify in full. Not just about the affair, but about Jackie's long-term schemes, how she used Doug's reputation as a clean baller to win sympathy grants, how she exploited faith-based tax loopholes to buy property under 501c3 status and then flip them through shell buyers, and how, in one instance, she even used Chantel's high school fundraiser as a cover to fly to Dubai with Chris on what the receipts now show was a community impact delegation trip that never actually happened, but was billed at over $47,000, all of which is now being cross-referenced by the IRS, the California State Auditor, and yes, the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, because Jackie didn't just play herself, she roped in her husband, her daughter, her former lover, her staff, her TV network, and even her fans. many of whom are now demanding refunds after discovering that their donations to Jackie's GoFundMe-style Rebuild the Block initiative it was a question of how much wreckage would be left behind, because just before sunrise on Monday morning, TMZ dropped a pixelated, zoomed-in mugshot of Jackie herself, hair wrapped in a courtroom scarf, eyes swollen, mouth grim set, with a caption that simply read, "Exclusive. Jackie Christie booked at 3:47 a.m. Federal charges confirmed." And within minutes, the image exploded like gospel at a revival, retweeted, remixed, memed into oblivion, and posted alongside side-by-sides of Jackie at red carpets, Jackie quoting scriptures on basketball wives, Jackie laying hands on Doug in front of TV pastors, and now, suddenly, Jackie in County Orange, booked for wire fraud, perjury, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, a fall from grace so dramatic, even her fiercest haters didn't see it coming so hard, so fast, or so complete. But the real aftershock came not from the feds, not from the fans, not even from Doug Christie, who by now had reportedly signed over power of attorney to his legal team and ceased all direct contact with Jackie entirely. No, the earthquake came from inside the belly of the beast itself, VH1, because as Jackie was processed, fingerprinted, and placed in holding, a subpoena landed on the desk of Basketball Wives executive producer Simon Blaine, a man whose entire career had been built on the chaos and conflict Jackie provided in 10-plus seasons of television gold, and when he appeared before the grand jury later that week, what he revealed sent shockwaves through both the entertainment industry and the federal courtroom, because according to Simon, under oath, Jackie's storyline had been partially scripted with her approval, and that several of the charitable efforts shown on camera were produced for optics, meaning fabricated, restaged, or exaggerated for emotional impact. And worse, that Jackie herself had privately lobbied VH1 to fund certain foundation events, only to divert the money to personal ventures, all while assuring producers she had the paperwork handled. And though the network initially tried to distance itself, leaked emails obtained by court insiders showed at least one VH1 staffer had questioned the legitimacy of Jackie's Hearts United event back in 2022, citing an invoice that looked photoshopped, and now federal prosecutors were reportedly considering whether the network bore any culpability in knowingly airing false philanthropic claims. But that wasn't the end, not even close. Because just as Jackie's attorneys scrambled to suppress more evidence and stop the bleeding, another body entered the courtroom, this time not with a folder, but with a face the press didn't recognize, but Chris Webber did, instantly, visibly, as did Jackie, whose entire posture shattered the moment the witness name was read, Marissa C. Dalton, age 28, Sacramento-born, currently residing in Chicago, and as she was sworn in, she paused, stared directly at Jackie, and said loud enough for the court to hear, "You told me I didn't matter. Now I'm here to tell the truth. And boss, if your jaw ain't already on the floor, pick it up, because what came next rewrote everything. Everything from season 3 of Basketball Wives to the entire foundation of Jackie and Chris's timeline, because Marissa claimed, under penalty of perjury, to be the first child of Jackie Christie and Chris Webber, conceived during a short-lived pre-Doug relationship in the late 90s, given up under a closed private adoption, and later tracked down her biological origins through a DNA ancestry test, a test she had submitted to the court, which confirmed with 99% certainty that her biological parents were indeed Chris Webber and Jacqueline Lee Christie. And as the room went dead silent, Jackie's hand flew to her mouth, and she mouthed the words, "Oh my God," not in denial, but recognition, because the real scandal wasn't that Marissa existed. The scandal was that Jackie had known about her since 2005 and kept her secret from everyone, including Doug, Chantel, and even Chris, having allegedly received a letter from the private adoption agency stating Marissa had made contact. And according to Marissa's sworn testimony, Jackie responded only once via handwritten note saying, "It was a mistake. My husband doesn't know. Please do not reach out again. May God heal your heart." And from that moment, the courtroom transformed into something otherworldly, no longer a space for legal deliberation, but for spiritual reckoning, as Marissa tearfully read aloud portions of journals she had kept over the years, including one from 2016 where she wrote, "Every time I saw Jackie Christie on TV, I thought, that woman is my mother, and she pretends I don't exist. And if you thought the judge would gavel this away as irrelevant, think again. Because prosecutors jumped on this revelation to what if I told you that the woman who built her legacy off televised drama, spiritual theatrics, and a persona engineered for applause just had her kingdom reduced to rubble? Not by a scandalous confession, not by a paparazzi ambush, but by a folder of text messages and a man who had been silent for far too long. Because Chris Webber didn't just walk into that courtroom as a witness. He entered like a war general, armed, calculating, and ready to detonate every illusion Jackie Christie had constructed over decades of televised devotion and off-camera duplicity. What unfolded wasn't testimony. It was a public execution of a persona, surgical, deliberate, and devastating. The courtroom wasn't just full, it was swelling with tension, a crowd split between fans, family, and media vultures, all waiting to see if this queen of confessionals would survive her own unraveling. And then it happened. Chris Webber walked in, calm, bloodied from a previous confrontation with Doug, and clutching a sleek black folder like it held the DNA to every deception ever whispered behind closed doors. Jackie sat in the front, frozen, lips tight, that spiritual wife energy gone, replaced by a woman visibly bracing for impact. Doug, shackled, defeated but simmering, his rage silenced only by the heavy reality of what had already leaked online. And Chantel, missing from her designated seat, rumoured to be in the building, but emotionally barricaded behind a wall of trauma, silence, and truth she wasn't ready to relive. But let's backtrack, because this moment wasn't born in one day. It was forged in decades of cover-ups, lies, pillow talk, and betrayal masked behind charity work, coaching trips, and family selfies captioned with Bible verses. What began as a sentencing hearing for Doug Christie, whose charges of aggravated assault against Chris Webber already set the internet ablaze, mutated into the trial of Jackie Christie's soul, reputation, and legacy. Because when Chris was sworn in, he didn't just bring words, he brought receipts. Printed, time-stamped, highlighted, and too damaging to be ignored. The first message? A 2:14 a.m. Whisper from Jackie. Doug thinks I'm at my sister's. I miss the way you see me. I feel alive with you. The second? A nostalgic confession. Sometimes I watch Chantel and wonder what could have been if we hadn't let fear run us. And just like that, courtroom oxygen vanished. Doug's body went stiff. Jackie blinked at nothing, and the courtroom erupted. Not in noise, but in stunned, pulsating silence. Bloggers tweeted in real time. Court sketch artists gave up drawing and just gasped. And even the stenographer missed a beat as Chris, with the calm of a man baptized in secrets, continued his purge. This wasn't a one-night affair. No. This was a multi-year love affair hidden beneath Doug's coaching schedule, behind charity galas and within fake LLC filings. The texts got darker. Hide the money. Doug can't find out. Tell Chantel she was an accident. And suddenly, and just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, when the dust seemed to settle over a courtroom still reeling from Chris Webber's tactical carpet bomb of truth, when Jackie Christie had sunk so far into her chair that even the courtroom cameras couldn't catch her face clearly anymore, Part 2 detonated like a grenade wrapped in silk, deadly, beautiful, and timed with surgical precision. Because what came next wasn't more texts, wasn't another voicemail, wasn't even surveillance footage. It was Chantel. But not the Chantel the world had known, the filtered, polished, carefully choreographed daughter of Jackie and Doug Christie, the girl who was always smiling behind her parents' staged unity. No, this was the woman forged in secrets, the collateral damage of a decades-long emotional war. And she didn't enter with tears. She entered in silence. A black dress, no makeup, hair slicked back, expression cold enough to freeze the entire courtroom. She didn't acknowledge Doug. She didn't even glance at Jackie. She walked straight to the witness stand like she'd waited her whole life for this moment, and maybe she had. Because before she spoke, before the judge even swore her in, Whispers flooded the gallery like a second wind of scandal. She's got a folder. She brought documents. Is she testifying against Jackie? And then the gavel slammed. Order restored. And the judge, eyes weary, voice cracking, simply asked, "Miss Christie, do you understand you're under oath?" Chantel didn't flinch. "Yes, Your Honor." The court reporter lifted her fingers above the keys like a sniper waiting for the target to move, and then it began. "I was told not to come today," Chantel said, voice measured. "My therapist begged me to stay home. My mother texted me 2 hours ago saying don't get involved, but I'm tired of staying quiet. I'm tired of pretending we were the perfect family. We weren't. We were a brand." Boom! Like a thunderclap, her words echoed. Jackie shifted,